What if there was a show where former NFL players could open up the vault of stories they've never revealed before? Well, now you have one. These stories come out on BR Gridiron's new show, Untold Stories. Check it out on the BR app. Back here on the Rich Eisen Show, and pleased to have right here back in studio one of our favorite guests to talk college football and so much more from The Athletic, Fox Sports college football analyst who was part of the broadcast last Friday night when USC shocked Utah using their third-string quarterback. Now it's USC ranked 21st, taking on number 17 Washington, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Fox, part of the broadcast team. Bruce Feldman, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you.
What is the story so far? Overarching, 1 month in, essentially, into the college football season, and the story is fill in the blank.
I think the story is, Clemson and Alabama are the two teams everybody thinks is great. They haven't played anybody yet. Ohio State's been dominant. They haven't played anybody yet. The one thing that's kind of been a surprise, and maybe it's a pleasant surprise, is that LSU, it's not just, your brother's LSU, your father's LSU anymore.
Right.
They got a big-time offense. Joe Burrow, former Ohio State quarterback, they're hitting the gas with this pass game. It came from the Saints with Joe Brady, who's a Sean Payton disciple, and it doesn't look like LSU anymore. Now, can they overtake Alabama in the SEC West? Who knows? After that, I think a lot of people are saying, we haven't seen a lot of big games yet. We just saw Notre Dame hang with Georgia but lose. But short of those two games, I feel like it's been kind of an underwhelming slate, and we're only starting to get warmed up.
Well, I mean, and then if you want to include teams at the top that have been a storyline, you have to look at Oklahoma and Jalen Hurts and what he's looked like in this Oklahoma offense.
Yeah, we had them.
Riley, right?
We had them their last time out. Our crew did the UCLA game, and it's impressive because this is the third transfer quarterback who has gone in to play for Lincoln Riley. This is actually the most accomplished one in terms of what he'd done before.
Of course.
Baker was pretty good at Texas Tech. Kyler Murray didn't do anything at Texas A&M. Jalen Hurts, people may forget, was like the SEC Player of the Year as a freshman. And I'll say this, having spent a little time with Jalen, he has a burning desire to get back to that national title game. I mean, it's just at the surface right now.
Well, Oklahoma fans who I know and have told me what they really like about Jalen Hurts is he's come and brought a sort of, for the lack of a better phrase, Nick Saban Alabama mentality that whatever he's done doesn't matter. It's all rat poison, essentially. The numbers are rat poison.
He'll say that, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he's brought that in a way where obviously Kyler Murray didn't say much. Baker, we all know what he brought, but Hurts is kind of bringing that mentality to this position that Oklahoma kind of hasn't seen.
Yeah, and I asking Lincoln Riley, I said, you have three very different personality types there, with Baker certainly being boisterous. And he said, of the three, he said, Jalen's probably a little closer to Kyler in terms of he's not as boisterous.
Right.
But there's definitely an edge there. And one thing I would say with him is a lot of times we default to, that kid is this or that. You almost refer to college guys as kids. You don't do that with Jalen Hurts. Even when he was 18, he did not seem like a normal 18-year-old. And now he's been through a bunch. I mean, you talk to him, and sometimes stuff will kind of come out where he's gonna, this guy
right.
graduated with a degree in public relations. He has a pretty good perspective on what he wants to put out there and the way he's going to put it out there. And I think he's mindful of that. You couple that with Alex Grinch taking over on defense. He done a really good job at Washington State. And I think his mentality is, listen, you guys can give up a big play, but don't break when you give up a big play. And I think that is different in terms of shaking things up, because Oklahoma had been really mediocre. They got to the playoff basically in spite of their defense. And I think those two things really change the demeanor of what Oklahoma is. Can it get them into the playoff again and win playoff games? I don't know if I'd bet against Jalen Hurts after being around them. Granted, UCLA's not they're not a top 25 team at this point or anything close to it, but you just see how they operate. And it's one thing to do it against air. It's another thing to see kind of what the standard is. And I think the standard has changed in Norman, Oklahoma because of those two guys on both sides of the ball.
Bruce Feldman here from The Athletic and Fox Sports on the Rich Eisen Show. It's a few weeks until I bang this drum as I do every year, so I might as well front load it. Just seeing all these games, and even though I know you said the schedule's been soft for a ton of them, and it has, but it just seems to me that when it all comes down to it, I'd love to see 8, teams battle it out. These guys, you just mentioned about LSU and obviously Ohio State with Justin Fields. It's possible Ohio State gets, picked off once, maybe twice in the Big Ten season. I don't think so. The same thing with Wisconsin. Same thing with Oklahoma, LSU, Georgia. I mean, one loss should not disqualify teams that are seemingly stacked like this, right? Or you tell me if I'm off here.
No, I'd like to see 8 teams as well, because I think right now you have 6 teams that seem like they can get in the playoff and win a playoff game.
Correct.
There's some other teams that can get in the playoff. I don't think they would. I just think they would be overmatched in that. You know what? You could even say maybe a 7th team. I was impressed by what I saw with Notre Dame. They still had some injuries, went into a really hostile environment in Athens, and held up and acquitted themselves really well against Georgia. So if you want to say the 7th team, they would certainly have to run the table and go 11-1 because they have no conference title game to prove themselves to get a little boost. But at this point, one thing I would point out is about who has a little margin for error. Clemson's is as talented as anybody, but as bad as the ACC is, this is the worst conference from like after Clemson that we've seen in a long time. There are maybe Virginia is a top 25 caliber team. After that, nobody is really close. I mean, you see it when Boston College looked like one of the better teams in the conference, and they got blown out by Kansas and Les Miles the week after Coastal Carolina beat them. You see Miami is down. Florida State is down. Those are the standard bearers, in addition to Clemson traditionally, of those programs that are in there, of those brands. Virginia Tech is down. Syracuse gets blown out by Maryland. I think that's a problem where I think Clemson is going to run through the ACC, including the title game. And what I wonder about is they won't get tested at all. Will that come back to bite them when they match up with somebody with similar talent in the playoff? It could.
I don't know. They just look so talented. The kid we see on the screen when I hear radio on it says Trevor Lawrence. I mean, really. He is just so amazing to watch. And then, the running game and then the wide receivers. I mean, every single wide receiver you see in the NFL, one invariably, not every single, but Clemson is just a factory when it comes to the defensive linemen that come out of Clemson now.
And it's
so, I mean, you can put them in right now. Is what I'm saying. Like, if you can put them in right now, and you're going to put Alabama in right now.
I would say Clemson is as close to a lock as you will ever get in late September.
I know, and Alabama's pretty damn near close to it too.
Pretty close. So, I think
they have to lose twice to not make it. Bruce, you and I both know
realistically,
that.
Yeah,
of course. So what? That's why I'm saying 8. Let's just for now. It's now. Forget about October. It's now with the way scheduling is in September. It's now affecting the way I'm watching football in September. I'm like, okay, I'm now going to sit here for the next few weeks and wonder who are the other 2 teams. I'd rather sit here and say who could be 6. Who could be currently 10th that can get into that spot. It makes it much more interesting.
I would hope it wouldn't affect how you watch it. I mean, anybody who stayed up late on Saturday night, granted, Washington State was undefeated at the time. I mean, that was a fun game. The craziness you get in Pac-12 After Dark is a reason to watch. There are no playoff teams going to be on that time slot.
I guess also, Bruce Feldman here on the Rich Eisen Show. Also, I've been turning my alma mater off at halftime 2 out of the last 3 weeks. So that might be dealing into it too. So let me get into this here. I'll ask you what tons of people are texting me and asking me and emailing me and calling into the show. What is wrong with Michigan? You were so high on them.
I was so high. I'll tell you where the area where I feel like has been the biggest dud of this is I thought they were going to have the best offensive line in college football. They don't have one of the best offensive lines even in the Big Ten. I mean, they were a real disappointment last week. And I think what you've seen right out of the gate, Shea Patterson, I know he got banged up. He was dealing with an oblique injury early on. But the turnovers, you cannot get into any kind of rhythm if you can't trust it with ball security. And so there's been that. They've had breakdowns in protection with the backs. And then the defense, like Don Brown, who was this wizard up till Dwayne Haskins got a hold of him at the end of last year, they've been in a free fall. And it just seems like a team that has lost its identity, a little bit lost its confidence. And I know Josh Gaddis pretty well. He's the first-time offensive coordinator there and play caller. I mean, he felt like one of the biggest things he could bring there was a jolt of confidence to the offense. And it doesn't look like a team right now that has that. because the best thing they have is they do have really talented wide receivers. But I think right now, both quarterbacks have been banged up. McCaffrey got drilled last week, and it doesn't look like he's going to be available to them. And Patterson has really struggled. Until they can find something they can hang their hat on to get into a rhythm, I think it's going to be really hard for them. Now, I did see Gaddis this week made it, I thought, at least a compelling point to say, look, a couple of years ago, he didn't mention that it was Penn State, but he was at Penn State. They start out 2-2. They got blown out by the Michigan Wolverines. They lost to somebody else. And there was a lot of people wondering, is James Franklin going to make it at Penn State?
Right.
And then they got it turned around. You know, they had Saquon, Trace McSorley. Now, I don't think Shea Patterson is Trace McSorley or anything close to that.
Well, that's a problem.
That is a problem. I mean, look.
Certainly when we're about to talk to about USC in a second, Bruce. I mean, USC goes with the third-string quarterback and wins a football game against a top 10 opponent that they have to win in the house, with Reggie Bush there and Urban Meyer there and the coach on the hot seat and the AD having quit. I mean, that happens there. And you're sitting here and saying that the quarterback that Michigan went and got as a transfer isn't Trace McSorley, who was terrific for Penn State, but that's a problem.
But that is a high bar. Trace McSorley was a great college quarterback.
But Michigan should have one of those. I'm being very honest with you, and I might be biased, but
Dylan McCaffrey might be that guy.
Right.
Down the road. Right now, again, and look, a couple of things. I don't know, 5 years ago when Ohio State wins the national title, they look awful on the offensive line early on. The same O-line coach who's the O-line coach in Ann Arbor, Ed Warner, was the guy who was the O-line coach when they were really bad at the beginning of the year, and they got much better by the end of the year where they were one of the best offensive lines in the country. Mm-hmm. If they can have that kind of growth, and they need to do it, and obviously they were banged up on the offense, a tackle, but look, and one thing that's not gotten said in here is enough. Wisconsin was really impressive.
They were terrific.
And I think you got to give a ton of credit
Taylor
to
is
that
amazing.
group.
I'm going to see him at the Combine in Indianapolis, and maybe
you're going to fall in love with him because he checks every box.
He checks every box, and he's leaving, right? This is the end of his stay there in Wisconsin.
Yeah, as a running back,
okay. So I think I'm going to hear his name, first 5 names in Las Vegas next year, potentially.
Maybe so. I mean,
that's how good he is. He's Chris. I don't know if you've watched this kid play football.
I have.
Taylor.
I have.
Holy cow.
He's made me some money this
physical,
year.
Nice.
Legit track kid.
Amazing.
Could have gone to Harvard. Just
amazing.
You fall in love with the kid when you're around him, and then he delivers on the field. The only issues he had early on were he had some ball security issues, and he wasn't a great receiver. No, he shored up that, and he's gotten to be a better receiver. And the quarterback there, Jack Cohen, is playing well. The thing that I would be most disappointed with if I was a Michigan fan is that was coming off a bye week. That's the worst part of it.
So what happens here? What do you think is there something brewing here? Because that's what I get all the time too.
When you say something brewing, like if you're a Michigan person, and obviously you are, Jim Harbaugh has won 10 games in 3 of the last 4 years.
No, I know that.
I mean, they hadn't won. They'd won that one time.
You can't find a bigger Harbaugh homer.
If you're a Michigan person, you go like, this isn't working out with Jim Harbaugh. I have my doubts. Like, I don't buy that Michigan has some kind of glass ceiling that they can't. Penn State, coming off sanctions and in a dark cloud, won a Big Ten title a couple of years ago. There's no reason why Michigan can't do it. They have all the resources. What I don't get is if you say, and look, maybe Jim Harbaugh says, you know what? Whatever reason, I have kids. I'm at this stage of my career. I want to go do something else.
In the NFL? I mean, the NFL knocks on his door all the time.
But to think that you're going to push him out the door, who are you going to bring in that was more, you had more confidence in winning than you had in Jim Harbaugh? There isn't that guy.
That's correct. Well, I mean, all the trolls, on the message boards is saying Urban Meyer would take the job?
Yeah.
Could you imagine? He can't even say the name Michigan. He's going to take the job.
It's absurd.
I mean, I think Matt Campbell's a great coach, but Matt Campbell's there's no sure thing that he's going to go into Ann Arbor and win there, and I'm not sure he'd want to take it. I have no idea that.
So I want to, before I let you go, Bruce Feldman, you were at the Coliseum last Friday night, and you're going to cover USC Washington this week, and they are going to go with their third-string quarterback, right?
It looks like. Keaton Slovis, who's the really talented freshman quarterback, still in concussion protocol. I was out there last night, so we're not sure if he's going to – it's very iffy he's going to play. So Matt Fink, who was the hero on Friday night, got some experience, and they got great receivers. Just throw it up. He plays aggressive. He lets them make big plays, and Michael Pittman, Tyler Vaughn's, those guys do it. But
so who's fourth?
That's the great question.
Should we know who the fourth stringer is? Because that's the kid who's going to win the football game.
As the sideline guy, I'm like, because they already had another quarterback who is Jack Sears, started the game last year. He's not even with the team now. He's a regular student there.
So this was during the game
During
last
the
week?
game, and I can't talk to Clay Helton in the middle of a quarter or one of the other coaches, but I can talk to somebody on the staff if I know a recruiting guy.
Right.
I grabbed one of the guys and was like, hey, by the way, who's your emergency quarterback? And the
This
guy
is
was
as Fink's out in the game.
This is as Fink is out in the game. It's early on, and he was like, that guy. And I was like, wait a minute, 27? He was like, yeah, that's him. And I was like, 27? And he said, well, he's a safety, but he's been the scout team quarterback. He came from junior college, and he was a walk-on. So I talked to this kid yesterday, Brandon Purdue. His dad is a veterinarian who actually is the veterinarian for Traveler. And so that's the USC horse that runs around there.
His dad is the doctor.
This is like a
for
Disney
the horse.
movie. This is a little bit like a Disney movie. Because the kid, he said, when I'm like, 5 or 6 years old, I'm at the Coliseum. I'm around the players. I'm watching them run out of the tunnel. I'm thinking someday that's going to be me. Well, then USC got the sanctions, and they weren't allowed to have the little kid on the field with the horse. But maybe that kid will get his shot.
If this is a Disney movie, then Traveler's going to be the backup kicker and kick the game-winning field goal.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know if Traveler was allowed in Husky Stadium.
Although Gus was a kicking mule. Let's just be consistent for everybody out there. So is that going to be the quarterback depth chart going into Washington?
Yeah, I mean, look.
For USC?
I mean, maybe Tyler Vaughns, who's a super talented receiver, and I watched him. He threw a couple reps. He's got a big-time arm, but he's never played quarterback. So as Graham Harrell said, if something happens, we got to get creative.
And how awkward is it? Let's be honest here. That Urban is in the building for that sort of stuff. I mean, that's how big a win it is, right? Because everybody thinks that this is the guy who's going to replace, or at least everybody in Los Angeles would absolutely love if Urban wanted to coach again and be the coach of USC. Is that unspoken, pretty much?
Yeah, I don't know what these USC fans, some of these diehards, I think they're really conflicted. They want to see their team win, but I think a lot of them would like, if he keeps winning, we can't make a change. And I think a lot of them, as much as everybody likes Clay Helton as a person, he's just a decent, nice man.
Right.
But I think a lot of them have never gotten over the fact that they didn't think he should be the head coach in the first place. And he's won a conference title. He's won a Rose Bowl. I mean, look, he's down to his third-string quarterback. They just beat a really good Utah team.
They sure did.
So I don't know. I mean, is Urban Meyer going to come back? I mean, I work with him. I'm not sure how many people know what ultimately he wants to do. Does he ever want to come back? I mean, he's still, he has the cyst in his head, which was, I mean, I did one of the games where he was on a knee and looked like he was an agony.
That was Maryland, right? That was
Nebraska game.
Well, I remember the Ohio State-Maryland game. They called timeout, and he wasn't even in the huddle. He's doubled over.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I think I don't think it's a slam dunk that he would come back or that he would come back to USC. I mean, if Clay Helton wins this game and then wins Notre Dame in a couple of weeks, I mean, I don't know how you again, he's down to his third-string quarterback.
Well, plus, isn't USC on the hook for several more years, right? Isn't that something?
They are, but USC has a ton of money. I mean, let's not let money stand. So, granted, it's not mine or your money, but I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Okay. So like, Jimmy Iovine just cuts a check, or Spielberg cuts a check?
I'm sure there's some Danny Dimes in the USC family who's got.
And just again, one more time. Danny Dimes was never around Duke, right?
No, he's Durham, North Carolina. Are you kidding me? Come on.
So there was no Danny Dimes at Duke. There was no.
If Danny Dimes played at Rutgers, maybe I'd buy that. But not at Duke.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and somebody pulled up in Stu Gatz,
have you guys
to watch.
Been to Durham, North Carolina?
I have, yes.
I mean, it's not.
There's no Dimes.
There's no Danny Dimes. There's no Danny Dimes where he was going down to.
No Johnny Two Times. No Johnny Two Times.
No.
At Bruce Feldman CFB on Twitter. I follow him. You should as well. You can check him out on Instagram at Bruce Feldman Fox, and you can check him out on Fox, USC Washington this week, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great time up there in that beautiful part of the country, sir.
Thank you, guys.
You got it. That's Bruce Feldman here on the Rich Eisen Show.
For more of the Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live, or download the Rich Eisen Show app.